All right. Woo. We have volume here. And I would like to say, if there's ever a time that you can't hear, just let us know. We did do a sound check before we started, but you never know. If you can't hear, please just raise your hand and give us a signal. Also, turn off your cell phones now, please. And as they say in the theater, don't open your candy once we start. So let's start over again and say welcome and glad to have you all here. Thank you very much for coming. I am Carol Russ. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area. And when we decided to host this event, there were several factors that we took into consideration. Oops. So this year, 2 very contested elections in our home communities spurred us to take another look at nominating systems, which are generally called caucuses. Another reason that our local league has studied our multiple local caucuses, or nominating systems, as we generically call them, is that there has been great change since we first studied nominating systems many decades ago. So caucuses, what do they do? And how do they do it? Well, we'll find out tonight. Representing 4 caucuses in 4 different communities, we have here with us tonight Paul Blahanka from Lake Bluff's Vote Lake Bluff group, Chris Bennis. Thank you. You have fans in the room, Paul. Woo! Okay, so we have Paul, and sitting next to him is Chris Bennis from the Lake Forest Caucus. Next, Paul Hilo is representing the Glencoe Caucus. And Susan Curry is here for the Winnetka Caucus Council. So directing the conversation tonight will be our moderator, Jan Dormer, sitting right here. She'll come to the microphone in a minute. And among her many excellent credentials, Jan is not only a very experienced discussion leader, she's also a former president of the League of Women Voters of the state of Illinois. So we're very glad to have her here. Yay! Oh, what a happy crowd we have tonight. How often does that happen? So, Jan will soon take over in a moment. So for the first part of the evening, she will pose questions intended to illustrate for you how these nominating groups do their work. And after that, then she'd like to pose the audience questions. She'd like to ask questions that come from you. So we have index cards for everybody. I see that some of you have them in hand. Please, as soon as possible, fill out that card if you have a question. Yeah, and do exactly that. Just raise it up high, and someone will collect your question from you, and we'll make sure that it gets to Jan. We may have to group like questions together, so we'll see how that works out, but we'll try to represent all of your areas of concern in the second part. So without further ado, let's get Jan up front. Yeah, and we have questions to hand out. If you would like one, just raise your hand. There's a taker over there. All right, Jan.
Okay, thank you. So, because we already have about 10 questions that our host, Lake Forest and Lake Bluff League of Women Voters, has already come up with, we're going to time you with your answers. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be, we're going to get the hook. We'll just gently remind you that maybe the time is up. And so we'd like concise answers. So let's start with caucus organization and structure. Let's aim for 2 minutes for this question. How is your caucus or nominating system organized? What are the roles of caucus members and leadership? And let's start with Paul, with the Vote Lake Bluff group.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. Is the mic on? Can you hear me? Yep. Yeah, okay. So Vote Lake Bluff is a grassroots organization of Lake Bluff residents. We have a very simple remit, and that is for the consolidated elections, talking about village and schools, libraries and parks that happen in the odd number of years in Lake County. We get together about 8 or 9 months prior to that, and we look to identify and support fellow residents, fellow Lake Bluff residents who are looking to run and serve their community. We start usually in the springtime of the even-numbered years. We have about 12 or 13 people on our committee, a couple of which are with me tonight, so I thank them for their attendance. And it's really, we have a website that the candidates can put on their statement of candidacy. We reach out to those various boards and try to identify the key issues that are challenging them and what they want to see out of prospective candidates. All of this work then culminates in a town hall meeting, which happens on the first Tuesday and Wednesday of December of even-numbered years. We have one night for the village and the library, and the second night for the parks and schools. And there is also a vote. There's actually 4 things that happen at those town hall meetings. The candidates give a statement of candidacy. The audience has a chance to ask questions. We take a vote for any contested election, meaning where there are more candidates than available board seats. And then lastly, for the winning candidates, they have the opportunity to get their petition signed that very evening by the meeting attendees. And then after that takes place, we disband for approximately 18 months. And the following April, the actual consolidated election takes place. But that is really the essence of our apolitical grassroots organization. We feel it is, small town democracy at its finest, hopefully. Thank you.
Chris Bonus from the Lake Forest Caucus.
Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here. So the Lake Forest Caucus is organized into 43 people that are elected from the 4 wards of Lake Forest. These are representatives from the community that are charged with finding, vetting, interviewing volunteers for all of the Lake Forest boards and commissions. There's about 15 or 16 of them. Boards and commissions like the Library Board, the Parks and Recs Board, BRB, Zoning, Board of Appeals, all the boards that essentially are the mechanics of Lake Forest municipal government. The committee also finds and recommends candidates for elected positions. The City Council of Lake Forest, there's 2 City Council people from each ward, the mayor, as well as the 2 school boards, District 67 and District 115. So the caucus as a whole is a body that is charged with finding the best qualified volunteers to staff these boards and commissions and help ensure that Lake Forest municipal government functions well. In terms of the leadership organization of the Lake Forest Caucus, we have an officer group that is charged with ensuring that the processes of the committee are followed and all the mechanics of the committee functions. We work year round. We go from April to the next April, and over the summer we really set the foundation for the coming year, creating strategies and starting to do a lot of the legwork to source the people and get them into the processes of interviewing. So it's a year-round activity for us with the Lake Forest Caucus.
Thank you. Paul Harlow, would you give us an explanation of your caucus?
Thank you for the invitation to be here this evening. The Glencoe Caucus, established in 1936, on the heels of dealing with controversy in the community, has proceeded to a system that has incorporated into the selection of people for various offices, elected offices within the village. It is comprised of, our caucus is comprised of 2 nominating committees. One is the village nominating committee, which selects candidates for village president, village board, library and parks boards. The school board nominating committee obviously selects candidates for school board positions. The third entity that comprises the caucus is what we have as a advisory council, and that group is formed oftentimes from people who have seated through oftentimes chairs of the nominating committees who sit and oversee the process, assist with the idea of how elections are conducted for positions on the nominating committees. They are responsible for all the appropriate filings to the state and county. They're responsible for working with the nominating committees in filing the petitions upon election or upon on slating of candidates, and conducting the biennial town meeting. That is a meeting that is the responsibility of the advisory council, and at that meeting, the candidates are presented that have been vetted through the nominating committees. It's a voice vote. The community endorses those candidates, similar to what I think Paul had remarked. Petitions get signed right there, and we get people into the process.
Thank you. Susan Curry with Winnetka Caucus.
Thank you. I really appreciate having the chance to be in a room of folks who are going to take this evening to think about caucuses and how they operate. That doesn't happen all the time, so thank you. This is my third year on the Winnetka Caucus, and I do have the privilege as serving as the chair.
Can you speak up, please?
I can. Does this help?
No.
The mics are not working? That better? Okay, I'm going to have to be really up close and friendly with this mic here. So I'm going to start by just giving you a quick outline of how Winnetka is organized as a village, and then I'll talk about how the caucus taps into that. So Winnetka is, I think, somewhat unique in that we have 4 co-equal taxing bodies. So the village, the schools, park, and the library, there is no hierarchy amongst those taxing bodies. They are totally separate and apart from each other, standing alone. We have geographic boundaries that are different amongst each of those different taxing bodies. So we do tap into parts of Glencoe, Kenilworth, and Northfield for some of the boundaries of our taxing bodies, which is just an interesting wrinkle. We slate candidates for all of those taxing bodies. We also produce platforms each year for those taxing bodies. We issue a fairly robust community survey every single year, and it is the direct feedback from the community and the data from that survey that we use as the basis for the platforms that we put forward, and that informs how it is we slate candidates. Our board structure, we have an executive committee. We also have 5 major committees: the Village Platform Committee, Village Slating, Schools Committee, Parks Committee, and Library Committee. We have standing committees as well that help us get the daily business of the caucus done. There's a communications committee, and fortunately there's a rules committee because we have 131 rules, and I'm trying to really simplify this for you this evening, which I hope you'll appreciate. This year we have 58 members of the Winnetka Caucus, and we do have term limits of 4 years of participation prior to stepping away from the caucus.
Thank you. Chris Bennis from the Lake Forest Caucus. Let's have you start. What is the role of registered voters at your caucus annual meeting?
So the role of our attendees at the meeting are to engage with the nominations that the caucus committee has put forward to serve in various capacities in the elected positions, such as mayor or school board or city council. So the annual meeting is held every year, typically in November, and the current approach at the annual meeting is for the candidates to present themselves, and there is a vote. That's the current approach that is taken by the community to ratify the candidates that are presented at the annual meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Harlow from Glencoe, how about, what's the role of your registered voters?
Well, the biennial town meeting that is conducted by the advisory council, whose role is to conduct that. And it starts with each of the presidents of the current boards presenting kind of the state of the state. give an overview of what's going on within their boards, what's going on, what issues are out there, and what they anticipate to be issues that the new board will have to address. Very simple. We go through after that introduction of the nominating committee candidates, those candidates that have been selected by the nominating committees to be presented. We ask for a voice vote to ratify those selections, and we then have presented with new members to take spots on the advisory council, and that's it. We present a treasurer's report. If there's any business that takes place, such as our last meeting, we had some amendments to the plan. Those two get presented to the participants who are at the meeting, and that's again a voice vote that moves that action forward. At that point, we break it and go to different positions where the petitions are signed by the selected candidates.
Thank you. Thank you. Susan Curry.
So I'm just going to start with the beginning of the community engagement at the start of each caucus year. So we do have a spring town hall, which is the first opportunity for us to put a forum in front of our community for all residents to participate in if they choose, and to hear from and ask questions of each of our taxing bodies. So that's really the beginning part of our dialogue. What we're talking about here is kind of that latter part of the year, and that's where we are in the Winnetka Caucus as of right now. We have a two-step process. We met actually just this week as a caucus, so the members who have put in the volunteer time to do the work of the caucus met earlier this week to vote on and approve the slated candidates, as well as the platforms that were put forward for each of the taxing bodies. We did that earlier this week. While it is intended for participation of the membership of the caucus each year, the doers on the caucus, it can be observed by any members of the community that choose to do so. We think that transparency is really important to our process and to buy into the result of our process. We will have a town hall meeting in early November at which the entire village will have the opportunity to vote on the slate that we've put forward.
Thank you. Paul Blanca.
Similar theme with Vote Lake Bluff. I mentioned our town hall meetings. We do require people attending that meeting to sign an affidavit attesting to their residency either within the village of Lake Bluff or some of the surrounding communities. The ballots that people receive are dependent on, for instance, if it's a vote for the Park District, that includes people in Lake Bluff and other surrounding communities that the Park District supports. Same with the school district, obviously. For the village and the library, the Lake Bluff residents only. But we get an attestation of their residency when they walk in the door during the evening. And then once they have that affidavit in hand, they are allowed to vote when we take our vote. We also ask our voters, as I mentioned previously, to help out those candidates who are endorsed by Vote Lake Bluff at the end of the evening and sign those petitions. So, and then lastly, I would just mention we are always looking for support from our fellow residents of Lake Bluff and registered voters to join Vote Lake Bluff and help out with the process.
Thank you. Paul Harlow from the Glencoe Caucus. Why don't you start with the question, in the election of caucus leadership, do voters have an option to approve or dissent? If not, how are caucus leadership members elected?
So the leadership of the nominating committee evolves from the nominating committees. So when they are concluding their process of vetting candidates, there's typically a rotation of half of the nominating committee coming off every two years, And those that have served as chairs, self-elected from within that group, have been chairs, will oversee the selection, which comes from those nominating committees, of the next chairs. It's typically 2 people that would accede to chairing a nominating committee, and that's how they would move up. Oftentimes, those people who have served as chairman of a nominating committee will also be those that will be considered for positions on the advisory council. Again, that oversight committee, and it's they then get determined. The people who are being nominated to be on the advisory council are vetted by a nominating committee that's comprised of different members of committees, and then they are brought forward at the biennial town meeting, whereupon their selection is ratified by that group. So the leadership in the nominating committees evolves through the nominating committees. The leadership at the advisory council, while typically comes from the leadership, former leadership of the nominating committee, or anyone else in the community that has shown to be have a responsible position or has been involved in local caucus activities or government activities.
Thank you. Winnetka Caucus, Susan Curry.
I'm going to be really transparent. I have not been through this part of the process yet because it happens at the end of our caucus calendar, and we have not made it there just yet. So I know that I received a call asking if I would be interested in serving in this role by my predecessor, but I do not know what formality he needed to go through to make that and all of the other assignments official. I am happy to read through these rules. I will probably not get through all of them in time to give you a more detailed answer this evening, but they are posted on our website if any of you would like to dig through them.
Thank you. Paul Blaharka.
So Vote Lake Bluff is not really a caucus. It's, again, as I mentioned, just a grassroots organization of committed residents and volunteers. Like Susan, I was also asked by the predecessor chair of Vote Lake Bluff if I would be willing to succeed him in the role. This was about 3 years ago. I had just retired, and I was a member of Vote Lake Bluff for a few years before that, but I felt like I was happy to take on that role. In 2020, we had no town hall meetings, and I venture to say probably others didn't either because it was kind of the wheelhouse of the pandemic. But we did have a drive-through petition signing event at the local elementary school, and I was happy to take a leadership position on that function, and I guess I proved my worth to my predecessor, so here I am as the current chair.
Thank you. Chris Bennis.
Sure. So all of the members, as I mentioned previously, of the Lake Forest Caucus are elected by the voting residents of Lake Forest, and the caucus committee itself decides who are going to be the officers every year. This is something that is the responsibility of the officers, the current officers on the caucus committee. The officers will look at the individuals on the caucus committee who are able to put in the time, that have the abilities to lead the caucus. There's a number of positions of importance that need to be filled every year from a leadership perspective, including communications, both internal and external. The position that I hold, which is to ensure that the processes of the caucus are followed. The vice president, which is somebody who assists in this process and is somebody who is learning how to ensure that these processes are followed in subsequent years, as well as things like fundraising and the website, for instance. So there's a lot of operational activities that the officers take on. The ward chairs for each of the wards are appointed by the officers every year, and the ward chairs are responsible for ensuring that each of the wards participate in the caucus process, which is typically more involvement in finding and interviewing certain candidates for board and commission. So certain wards will have more responsibilities for one particular board or commission compared to others, and the ward chairs provide that leadership. These officers are renewed every year. A third of the caucus committee renews every year. So the selection of the new officers is done, like I said, by the officers and the committee as a whole, and are presented at the spring meeting in the spring to the rest of the community.
Thanks. Susan Curry from Winnetka. If the community vote does not support the caucus proposed slate or a particular candidate, how do your governing documents resolve this issue?
Great question and very relevant on a regular basis. I think also a really important aspect of caucus legitimacy, right? So there are two opportunities for the village to contest our slate. First, caucus members are able to challenge the slate in advance of the meeting that we just had this past week, where we present the slates and the platform. So challenges can be put forward through a process outlined in the bylaws for challenging those in advance of that meeting. There is a specific date by which those challenges have to have been submitted for them to carry forward into the meeting. If the slate is contested prior to that meeting and all of the requirements have been met, that in addition to the slated candidates who get to speak and present at that meeting, the additional candidates that have been put forward have the opportunity to speak and to be voted on as part of that meeting within the caucus. There is a second opportunity for challenges to be put forward, and that is in advance of the town hall, where the entire village votes on the slated candidates. And so there are really two opportunities for those challenges, as well as for those candidates to present at the forums.
Thank you. Paul LaHonka.
So, in the setting of a contested election, again, meaning more candidates than the available spots on the board, everything really funnels up to that town hall meeting. Prior to that, people can submit their statement of candidacy. They can knock on doors, but it all comes down to the town hall meeting when they publicly meet the Lake Bluff community. They hear from the community via questions, and they give their statement of candidacy, and then a vote is taken. And if it's like a situation we had this past December, we had 6 park board members running for 3 available spots, including 3 incumbents who were looking to re-up and 3 new folks. So the vote was taken. The incumbents were the 3 highest vote getters, and they were able to have their petitions signed that evening, but the other 3 folks who ran for those positions went through the proper process of filing. All 6 names were on the ballot this past April 4th, and the town decided in the municipal election, who their preference was. And in that particular example, the Vote Lake Bluff endorsed candidates also prevailed in the general election. But prior to the town hall meeting, really we accept any number of candidates, and we like the fact that people are interested in serving, so we have no problem with a contested election. Usually it's a worse problem when you have 3 spots and you're struggling to find 1 or 2 candidates to fill them.
Thank you. Chris Bennis, Lake Forest.
Yeah, that is the challenge, is to find the volunteers to come forward and work for the community. I think it's a challenge we all share here as caucus committees and caucuses. So the Lake Forest Caucus, we have 2 paths. The first path is that we find volunteers that are nominated for appointment by the mayor every year. So we do our best job to present those candidates to the mayor for nomination, and ultimately the mayor has the final say on whether or not those candidates get appointed to the boards and commissions in Lake Forest. And typically we have a pretty good track record. We try to do our best. We're very detailed in how we search for people and pair them up with qualifications to make sure we're finding people with the right skills and the right experience to serve the current needs of the boards and commissions in Lake Forest. In terms of the elected positions, that is one of the things that we're going to be addressing here in the future relative to your question, in terms of clarifying some of the items in our bylaws and how to actually deal with the operating procedures at our annual meeting. We had an interesting scenario last year that these clarifying procedures will help put us on a path to ensuring that we're not going to have as much ambiguity on a path to proceed after a particular elected person is put forward at an annual meeting, and that's going to be a focus point at our annual meeting this year.
Thanks. Paul Harlow, Glencoe.
So following the release of the slate, which comes out publicly before our biennial meeting, thanks to the help of our dear friend Dan Dorfman here, that information is those candidates are presented at the biennial town meeting. I am not aware of a challenge to the slate, the proposed slate, coming forth at the biennial town meeting. That's not to say that there hasn't been candidates who have applied and run against the caucus slate. That has occurred. If that does occur, the charge of the caucus is to fund and to campaign on behalf of the slated candidates that the caucus had selected.
Thanks. Paul Blahanka, Vote Lake Bluff. What do you do to increase voter participation? Do you measure the impact of your Get Out the Vote effort?
So I mentioned our website. I think it's an invaluable piece of information for the entire Lake Bluff community to access, to find out not only who are the candidates and what are they thinking about in terms of a run for a particular board, but to understand what are those issues of the respective boards. I think that's just incredibly important. And even if you're not running for office, what's going on at the library? What are the major issues facing the park board? What are the issues with the schools and whatnot? So we use that website as a portal of information. We also advertise the town hall meetings by way of lawn signs and triptych signs at key corners within our village, and a big banner going into the Lake Bluff Golf Course and recreational area where there's a lot of activity, and it also is the entrance to the school. So a very high visibility area in terms of publicizing not only our organization, but those town hall meetings. So, we had a packed house at our elementary school for the Parks and Schools this past year. So we think we've been fairly effective. And again, it's a town of about 5,500 people. So everybody knows everybody and word gets out. But thankfully, we've had a high level of interest over the past few meetings we've held.
Thank you. Chris Bennis, Lake Forest.
Sure. It's really a never-ending process for us. We have to continuously engage the community for a variety of different reasons. One is to ensure that there's as much understanding as to what we're doing as a caucus as possible. We send out email newsletters. We hold various events. We participate in Lake Forest the Day Parade, for instance. We had a recent event at Lake Forest Place. We go and have various social events that we encourage the community to come to. This is all for the purpose of education to the degree possible. We're also recruiting constantly. We're as part of these engagement points, we're looking for people to participate in our process, to come forward as volunteers, to make their interests known so that they get into the various pipelines for various boards and commissions and other in the elected positions. So it's a constant process. We recently started a video series where we're going to be interviewing a number of past and current volunteers so the community can understand what it's like to be a volunteer, what type of commitment is necessary. I think sometimes there's a lot of unknowns. People don't understand what it takes to serve on the BRB, or the Plan Commission, or how it's different than ZBA. So education is something that we're really starting to push so that people understand the options and the differences that are available to them to volunteer. We also engage the city staff on a regular basis. We talk with them to understand what their needs are, to get their perspectives on the various boards and commissions and how they're functioning. We have a liaison program where we have caucus committee members that actually attend boards and commission meetings. They attend city council meetings to understand how things are working, to feed back into the caucus committee process, to equip us with as much information and data as possible to help us do our job, which is fundamentally finding and interviewing the best qualified residents of Lake Forest to serve the community.
And Paul Harlow.
Yeah, you know, if anyone has a solution to how you reach out to members of your community to make sure that everyone is informed, let me know. I've been in local government for 48 years, in some capacity, and for 48 years, and as you have suggested, it is a never-ending process. And any time you can find means of being able to get information out to your community, no matter what it is, whether it's participation in a parade or a fair or whatever, you've got to find ways to take advantage of it. There's nothing better than what we have found in terms of how the caucus works than word of mouth. Getting somebody to talk to somebody else, get them engaged and involved in what it means to be involved in local government. And not only what it means to be involved, but how important it is. How important it is to protect those things that are important to your community. One of the things I have in addressing some of our nominating committees, hang on dearly to what we have and the process that we go through and inform people in your community. The election process, one of the most difficult things of our election process is I would call it the election of people for our nominating committees. You know, people will come forward as we advertise it and fill out an application to be a member of a nominating committee. Then it's the election that had become difficult. How do we generate enough interest in that? And that is still hard to do, but we've done it. We have gone to a electronic election process. People vote online now. We do that, and the means for which we hold that all together, all the information as to what's upcoming with that election is to send out a postcard, you know, to use the postal service, the address system that has every address in the community. We send that postcard out. It assures us of the at least that it's going to arrive at that location, and if there are registered voters in there, we hope that they will look at it and participate.
And Susan Curry.
Can you just repeat the full question so I'm
Sure.
on that point?
What do you do to increase voter participation? Do you measure the impact of your Get Out the Vote effort?
We do measure participation and impact. Obviously, when there are contested elections, we get a higher level of turnout, and I think that's one of the benefits of contested elections. And, you know, what I didn't put a fine point on earlier is when our slate is contested at the caucus meeting versus the town hall meeting, the candidates that come out of that are the caucus slate. So our caucus slate is adjusted for what comes out of that meeting. There is a second opportunity to challenge our slate at the town hall meeting. But I think that's a really important part of what we do, and that's really how we get engagement. Because if there isn't anything to debate, then no one's talking about it, and we're not seeing anyone on the line other than the same folks who are at every meeting. I will tell you, so I have this big pile of paper here for a reason. Our best weapon around engagement in Winnetka is the annual survey. This 294-page document is a printout of the community's responses to our survey this year. It includes more than 1,000 individual comments in addition to the votes on all of the questions that we asked of them. These are real practical things, and we get responses back across the board. One of the things I learned, a lot of people are really upset that they have to pay for the Easter egg hunt now, and it's $20 per person per family. We did not specifically ask about that, but it is an event that used to be free, according to the comments, and it's an indication that while the response said that folks are generally very happy with the services that the Park District provides to that segment of the population, there's something worth exploring further as we go into next year. This document is terrific. It gives us hardcore data on what is being discussed, and I think one of the most important pieces is it goes to every household. It's kind of fun to complete. People talk about it with their neighbors, but most importantly, we get participation from the entire community and not just that small handful of residents who show up at the meetings in person on a consistent basis.
Okay, Chris Bennis. I'm going to skip a question because I think you all answered the previous one about voter input. This was voter input. But does your caucus create a platform based on voter feedback?
So our mission is not to create policies or create agendas. Our mission is to find the best qualified candidates that, as they're put into positions in municipal government, have the skill sets to solve the problems in the given moments that can include lots of different issues and agendas and platforms. So we as a caucus committee don't concern ourselves with things like Easter egg hunts as much as we want to. We concern ourselves with finding the right individuals who have the time and the capacity and the experience to solve problems that we can't even anticipate on the various boards and commissions and in the elected positions. So our interview process and what we do is geared towards that. How do you ensure that individuals have demonstrated abilities to solve tough problems that they might encounter on the school board, for instance? These are sometimes very, very difficult things to do, but that's what we endeavor to do. So we don't put forth a platform, so to speak. Our mission, our agenda, is to find highly qualified individuals to serve Lake Forest and how they have to serve in the moment and in the positions they have to serve in.
Paul Harlow from Glencoe.
Yes, Glencoe Caucus does not have or produce a platform for the community. And our position is similar to what was just stated in terms of finding candidates to serve on to serve on different boards within the community. Oftentimes, the nominating committees can get focused on what do we need? What is that next? Is there an engineer we should go out and find who we can elect to the board, or is there legal issues that are important? And I think the focus should stay upon, and we try to reemphasize the idea that you find somebody who is reasonable in the way that they look at issues, no matter what those issues are, that can give a valued, overall, objective analysis of what they're faced with.
Thank you. I was paying attention, and I heard that Winnetka does create a platform.
We do. We create a platform for each of our core taxing bodies. In the platform this year, it's posted on our website if you are inclined to take a look at them. I'm not going to pretend they're perfect, but they are well-intentioned, and I think they are transparent. Within the context of each platform, we include data around the survey responses to tie a clear line between what we heard from the community and what is included in the platform. I will say, I think it's one of the most important parts of what the caucus does. And while I use the Easter egg hunt in jest because it's not a particularly high sensitivity topic, I think it is representative of the fact that we learn an awful lot from the community around the things that we ask about and the things that we don't ask about. And for them to know that not only do we have a lot of confidence in our slated candidates, but that we are asking the candidates as part of our process to indicate that they are going to step into the role with the intention of supporting our platforms is really important to getting buy-in for that slate. That they are here, they've heard the community through our survey and through our platforms, and that is something that is going to guide how they work when put into the actual chair.
And vote Lake Bluff.
Thank you, Jen. So not a lot to add. I think for Vote Lake Bluff, it's very similar to what Chris and Paul very nicely articulated for their communities. We have no platform. Again, our sole remit is to get the best understanding we possibly can for the major issues that affect the current boards, and to identify and support those candidates that we think would be strong people to address those needs.
Thank you. Paul Harlow from Glencoe. When your caucus committee is interviewing a potential candidate for a position, how important is it for that volunteer to articulate their position on a local issue?
Well, I think it's extremely important for the nominating committees to get a sense of how, as I said earlier, what's important is how a person will look at an issue, what process they will use to evaluate what issue is being presented. So to give put candidates or people that are being interviewed in the position of being responsive, and the thought process that goes into it, I think it is critical to the understanding as to how they will see issues that they will be faced with if elected or slated and then elected to those positions.
Thank you. Susan.
As I mentioned earlier, we do ask everyone who has applied, and anyone who applies for a position that's open on one of our village boards goes through the full process. The process is confidential. We do that to encourage people to apply. They don't always get slated the first time they apply. We want them to come back, and we don't want them to feel like there's going to be a black mark on them out in the community because they raised their hand to serve and they just weren't the top pick this year. So that process is confidential for good reason. It is very measured to ensure consistency and equity and equal opportunity across each of the interviews. I will say one of the areas that I'd love to dig into a little bit more is around reference checks and what the other caucuses here tonight do around looking into that component of a candidate when you're looking to slate them. It's something that we probably could get into in a little more detail in Winnetka beyond checking the references provided. But the process is clean, it is consistent. We are a group of volunteers. It does not always run 100% as intended, like any other caucus or volunteer organization. On occasion, we have stubbed our toes, and we double down on how we communicate and educate moving forward around those particular nuances.
Thank you. Vote Lake Bluff. Paul.
So Vote Lake Bluff does not have any formal interview process or vetting of interested candidates to our organization. We do ask for a statement of candidacy. We do make sure that if someone is running for example, a village or a library position, that they do live within Lake Bluff and not a surrounding community. And I know during pandemic, we were conducting some Zoom interviews that got posted to our website, but I think that was more just to make some type of visibility for the community to have a listen and understand who was running and what their positions were. But as a general rule, there's no formal vetting process for Boat Lake Bluff.
Thank you. Chris Bennis.
So for Lake Forest, we have a very regimented interview process, which is targeted towards objective analysis. We're looking for individuals that have skills and experience to solve problems. I think the question was, is it important for a candidate to be aware of a local issue? It's important for candidates for all positions to be aware of what's going on in the community. The more knowledge that they bring into the position, the better off that they'll be able to make good decisions, good data-driven decisions. So being aware singularly of issue A or B is not the only criteria that we look for. For instance, who could have been aware that COVID was going to happen in March of 2020? And if we had focused on the ability for school board members to be able to analyze pandemics, maybe we would have had that would have hit it. But who could predict what the next problem is going to be? And that's why we're not focused singularly on looking at candidates that have exhausted information around one issue or another. We're looking at candidates who can objectively solve problems, collaborate well with others, listen to others, go into a situation and learn how a particular board or commission is functioning. It takes a while to get going on a school board, for instance. The first year or so is a learning process to how well do these candidates adapt themselves in past situations to quickly get on board and start contributing. We also look at the particular needs of the boards and commissions. There may be a need for some strong finance skills somewhere, and we don't want to go after somebody who isn't going to complement or a particular board or commission if another skill is needed. So it's a wide-ranging process, but we're mainly looking for people who can do a good job of solving problems and objectively considering things and not bringing agendas into the process.
I'd like to just do one last question that was came up from the league. What do you see as the biggest risks to the caucus system? Susan Curry, can you be concise?
I mean, I'm going to be honest, I probably will answer this question differently every week depending on what's going on with our caucus and our community. You know, I don't view contested elections as being our biggest challenge. If there are never any contested elections, people are not paying attention and they're not engaged. Now, if we have our slate contested every year, that's also a sign of a problem. But in the middle there, I think that's a sign of a healthy electorate. One of our challenges that we tackled this year was trying to get a greater level of engagement from school-age families. So we were seeing the demographics in participation at meetings as well as in participation at our survey, which is really important to us, really skewing toward that senior crowd. The pandemic did not help with that. We had a massive influx of new families into the community. No idea what a caucus system is. Definitely not the first thing they're paying attention when they're settling into a new house, a new neighborhood, a new school system, what have you. So we made a concerted effort on that this year, and I will tell you we had phenomenal results in terms of engagement around the survey from those young families, and our demographics are much more evenly skewed this year, which is terrific. Engagement is always going to be the challenge. And there's a new challenge that we're dealing with right now, which is just a little bit of a change in kind of the type of discourse that people have, right? I think it is harder for people to really trust the word nonpartisan. People come into most conversations around political items assuming that someone is partisan and already has a view, and getting them to be open-minded and participate in our dialogue or pay attention to how we run our process, to get them to believe in our being truly nonpartisan organization, which, by the way, is not the same thing as saying every individual member is nonpartisan, but it means we have a nonpartisan process.
Vote Lake Bluff.
Can you just repeat the question?
Sure. What do you see as the biggest risks to the caucus system?
I think one word sums it up: apathy. When we get to the point where we're really struggling to have qualified candidates or candidates at all, as board positions become open, as we see declining interest in the attendance at our Vote Lake Bluff Town Hall meetings, disinterested, disengaged community members. Thankfully, that hasn't been the case so far. One of the reasons we take a vote at our town hall meetings is because it's our belief that people want to have a voice, and they, even though it's not the official vote, it's not the consolidated election, but it helps us get a good sense of the temperature of the community in terms of favored candidates or directions or people who are best positioned to affect positively the various issues that these boards are presenting, right? So, when we fail to keep getting good candidates and when there's a dearth of discussion within the community, that's a problem.
Lake Forest.
So I think the biggest risk is just finding enough volunteers who are willing to commit the time and do the work. It's a lot of these positions, it's not easy on these boards and committees. There's hours of work that has to be done on a weekly basis, and it's all for the benefit of the community. And a lot of times the people that serve on these boards and commissions aren't getting heaps of gratitude from the community in what they're doing. What they're hearing almost continuously is how they should be doing things differently, or how they should consider this, or this decision wasn't right, or that decision wasn't right. But that comes with the territory, and they realize that. So all these volunteers are motivated to serve the community, but the biggest risk is that people lose interest because it's not easy and it takes time. Fortunately, like Forest, we have a very, very healthy pool of people who want to volunteer. That includes on the caucus committee. We probably average 2 to 4 hours a week just doing the things that need to be done to find and interview volunteers, talk about what they're interested in, go on to the next person. The ward meetings, there's probably been 12 or 15 that have happened over the last 2 months on the wards alone to vet various candidates. So I think the risk is just keeping that volunteer pipeline full, keeping people interested, and make sure they know how important their service is to the community, despite all the challenges that come with it.
And Glencoe Caucus.
Yeah, I take a little bit different in context, to the extent that I really think what's important in sustaining the caucus system in Glencoe is what happens at those board meetings. The village board is going to be judged on how they deal with issues and conflicts. And as long as we continue to produce quality candidates who serve the village in elected capacities, that caucus system is really working. But if we get to the point where issues and conflicts that are going to occur in every governmental organization, if there's a perception within the community that they're not being handled the right way, or that the elected officials are missing something or not looking at it in a way that encompasses the view of the community, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be more and more challenges to the caucus. I think that's a real concern, and I think it's real important that communities, when they get to issues, that they look at them in a reasoned and responsible way to let the community know that they're taking into account the things that are impacting them.
Okay, we've got questions from the audience.
This.
Okay, let's start with Paul Blanca, Vote Lake Bluff. What is your fundraising mechanism? How much did your caucus spend on the last election cycle?
Thank you to whoever asked this question. It's a very important one. And what I neglected to mention, another key component of our town hall meetings is it is our single and solitary source of funding. I got up, in the last election and let the entire audience know both evenings that we will be passing the hat. And we've been pretty successful over the years in achieving that objective. I think the last meeting cost approximately $2,000 to put on. So the maintenance of our website, the domain name, and the licensing fees is a considerable expense, as are the yard signs and the banners. We have to pay insurance for the Lake Bluff Elementary School, which isn't cheap, and some other miscellaneous expenses. One thing we did last time, and I would encourage others to look at it, is we set up a Venmo account. So rather than passing the hat and, the amount of people carrying cash these days, it seems to get thinner by the year. But we posted our Venmo address, and we had a really strong turnout in terms of getting funding. So that's how we stay afloat.
Thank you. Chris Bennis.
Sure.
Lake
So
Forest.
fundraising typically with the Lake Forest Caucus has consisted of a couple events that we hold over the course of the year. We invite the community to participate, and there's various raffles, things of that nature at the event. We're really looking to turn this into more of a continuous engagement process instead of one singular event. I think there's a couple benefits to that. One is that the engagement also helps educate people, it keeps people tied into the process, it creates more interest and identifies people who may be interested in volunteering. So it's not exclusively just fundraising. So that's what we're going to start looking to going in the future instead of relying on a one singular event. When there are contested elections, one of our duties is to support our candidates, and that can cause us to spend an additional amount of money. And in those years, typically we solicit and get donations from the community that supports us and supports the caucus. So that brings in additional funds. Like I said, though, going forward, we want to turn this into more of a continuous process of fundraising.
Paul Harlow, Glencoe.
Yeah, our budget is very, very minimal, as stated. The website, license, that one postcard we send out every 2 years. We used to send out all our ballots to every home in a hard paper copy with a return envelope, and that was the major cost of the caucus. Going to electronic process of voting now, that's taking care of it. And we've also added a little feature of an endorsement for anyone who wants to send in donations and those electronic ballots, as well as we capture email addresses, which has been instrumental in being able to develop our database. So a couple times a year we'll send out to that email database. Frankly, we'll get the $100, $200 checks from people who have served in capacities within the village or who have served on a caucus committee. But it's minimal. It's not more than a few $1,000s for recycle.
Susan Curry.
I'm right in line with the rest of these folks, which is we run on a really small budget. We do not do any sort of official fundraising other than we have a little donation button at the top of our website, and we do try and make the website relevant and have good content on there to get some people to look at what we're doing, and in the process maybe they see that donation button. When we are going through the process of sending the survey out and the survey results, we also just ask folks if they see value to throw in a few shekels. I will say we run on a similar budget that's generally under $2,500, and it's usually mostly around the technology and the platform that we need to keep operating. And we've got an awful lot of members of the executive committee who do not submit their receipts, and that's their form of donation.
Okay, you all see all these questions? See all of these? We're not going to get to all of them.
I think if they explain this, these are two similar questions.
Okay.
Packets.
Okay, so is your caucus a political action committee or a political party? And then this is another question all combined? Is your caucus registered with government as a PAC? And how many candidates do you, for each office, present to the registered voters to vote on? So let's start with Lake Forest. Chris
Sure,
Bennis.
so yes, the caucus is a PAC, we're a political action committee that allows us to support our candidates that we put forward for election in the general election. It allows us to raise money and help ensure that they're successful in the general election. So that is the nature of our PAC. We are not affiliated with any political party. Our politics, again, are finding the best qualified individuals to serve the community in the various capacities in which we're looking for them to serve.
Paul Harlow, are you a PAC? Is the Glencoe Caucus?
Political party that has all the proper filings with the state on a quarterly basis yeah.
Susan?
Winnetka, we are not organized as a PAC. Our candidates are listed as nonpartisan, and we are not affiliated with any political party.
I'll say Vote Lake Bluff is not a PAC nor affiliated with any political party.
Okay. Okay, we'll start with Paul Harlow, Glencoe. Do you watch your elected candidates in your city council village board meetings? How many caucus members attend city/village council meetings?
No, there's not a regular monitoring of candidates that have been slated by the caucus, and I would say that attendance at regular board meetings of these elected bodies is minimal, and we do not put any requirement for any members of a nominating committee or caucus to attend meetings.
Thank you.
Typically, this is the process where they would view them, recording meetings.
Okay. Winnetka, Susan Curry.
So we ask all of our members who are responsible for slating or for platforms to engage with not only the community, but also the taxing body. We think it's really important to have a dialogue there and understand not just what's currently being discussed, but what future initiatives might look like. We'd like to get ahead of that. We do not monitor their attendance at meetings. I will say one of the best things that has happened to members of the caucus, particularly those who have young children, is that almost all of our meetings are now broadcast over the internet, and so one can stop, start, and watch at their convenience if they cannot watch live or be there in person.
Thank you. Vote Lake Bluff.
No formal requirement or expectation of our committee to attend various board meetings. I will say, people do. And our village, our library, our parks, the schools do a nice job, I feel anyway, via the newsletters of keeping people abreast of the issues. We're all concerned, responsive citizens, so hopefully people on their own accord can and will attend those meetings where they see there's an issue.
Thanks. Chris Bennis.
So for the Lake Forest Caucus, we feel it's really important to have a feedback loop into our committee as to what's happening on the various boards and commissions. So we have a liaison program. We have dedicated caucus committee members that are assigned to attend boards and commissions, as well as city council meetings in Lake Forest. They bring back notes, and this is communicated on a regular basis to the caucus committee. And that includes what issues are being discussed, participation, attendance, those types of things. It helps us understand how the candidates and the nominees that we've put forward are serving the community, and helps us make, could possibly help us make decisions in the future around open boards and commissions.
Susan Curry, Winnetka. Do you consider it part of your job to weed out people with extreme agendas?
Oh, goodness. I view it as the mission of the caucus to have a robust enough membership that anyone with an extreme view cannot dictate the agendas or the slate. We do not filter for political bias or persuasions when folks apply to be a member of the caucus, but we do have a set process that is designed to make sure that what we hear, and again through the survey, this is really important because there's data, that everyone knows that what we're focused on is not the individual view of a member, but it is the view of the community.
Paul Blanca.
So in my time on Vote Lake Bluff, I don't recall any experience where a candidate, was so caustic or contentious that at the Vote Lake Bluff level, they weren't allowed to submit a statement of candidacy provided, they were applicable to that particular board. That being said, we trust the process. So at the town hall meetings, if certain views are espoused, let's let the community react to that and vote on that. And more importantly, the same with the consolidated elections in April, that, people are free to have an opinion, but the voting public is also free to express their own opinions on whether or not they think that type of extreme ideology is best for a small community like Lake Bluff.
Thank you. Chris?
So yeah, we're looking for individuals that do not bring agendas with them into the volunteer roles in which they're being considered. We feel that by bringing agendas into those roles, that's going to serve a singular purpose instead of what's in the best interest of the particular role in the community at the time and what people are being asked to do. So that is a cornerstone of our process to ensure that we try to identify if there are any individuals that are looking to put forward an agenda any which way, and we try to eliminate that because we're looking for people, again, that are going to come in and deal with the problems at hand, look at things objectively, collect information, work with others to collaborate and make the best decisions in the best interest of the community, rather than bringing in a strong agenda that might influence it one way or another based on a small group or an individual.
And Paul Harlow.
Yeah, and only to add upon that similar perspective, nominating committees are big enough. There's representatives from each of the precincts. There's 30 members of the village nominating committee. That tends to be able to deal with anyone who would have an opinion or a position that might be needed to be balanced.
Thank you. Paul Blanca. If a resident would like to serve on a municipal board or commission, does they submit an application to the city manager or to your caucus?
I think initially the candidacy for application would go to Vote Lake Bluff if they choose to participate in that process, and hopefully they would feel like, why wouldn't I? It's really their only opportunity to, in a very wide forum, express their views on why they are a good candidate for that particular board position. But we do accept those statements of candidacy. They're posted on our website, and we look to encourage, again, other Lake Bluff residents to serve. So I think that would, since our town hall meeting comes before the actual consolidated election, I think for most of the candidates that's a logical first step.
Thank you. Chris Bennis.
Yes, for residents of Lake Forest, they submit a volunteer profile which articulates the interests they may have for various boards and commissions. They provide some backgrounds on their experience, their professional experience, their volunteer experience, and that serves as an input into our process.
Paul Harlow.
Village Park, libraries, interest in being on any of those boards get caucus committees and commissions go through the village manager's office.
Thank you. Susan?
So we would be similar in that really it's the board members and the trustees that go through the caucus. The other roles on the commissions and committees do not. I will say one of the services that we offer to our village is where we have someone who's expressed an interest and or applied for a role that they did not get slated for, we like to try and find and point them in the direction of some of those opportunities that will help them round out their familiarity with the process, become more engaged, and add some value to the community through volunteer on one of those commissions and refer them into the right direction to do that.
Okay. Okay. Chris Bennis. Checks and balances, part of democracy. Votes by citizens are a check on the caucus. Why depart from this democratic tradition?
So I'll say a couple things in response to that. The citizens vote for the representatives that serve on the Lake Forest Caucus Committee. So the citizens of Lake Forest decide who represents them to execute the mission of the caucus. And that's one of the first voting opportunities that Lake Forest citizens have. The citizens also have a right to vote for the candidates that the caucus committee puts forward or not. That's another opportunity for the citizens of Lake Forest to exercise their voting rights. In terms of the annual meeting, we're presenting a clarifying act in our bylaws to help facilitate a smoother process that the caucus uses to ensure that we don't carry forward or are influenced by agendas as part of that process. So that's what's going to be voted on this November 7th.
Could you repeat that? I wasn't following that part. I'm sorry.
Sure. So on November 7th, the caucus is going to be forward, the caucus committee is going to be putting forward a clarifying component of our bylaws for the residents of Lake Forest to vote upon.
So in your governing documents, you're clarifying voting on the slate?
So we're clarifying the process that's used to confirm our candidates for elected positions. That's what's being put forward at the annual meeting. One of the challenges that we feel needs to be corrected is to ensure that a small group doesn't disrupt the caucus process and invalidate the hard work that many people do, the elected representatives of the citizens of Lake Forest do, to put forward candidates that are going to serve the community as a whole.
Okay, and how are you doing that how is your clarification doing that?
So that is going to clarify that the approach that the caucus committee takes is at the annual meeting is going to present the candidates that we feel are best qualified to serve the residents of Lake Forest.
So the caucus leadership can overrule the vote?
So there is no ratifying vote. We're proposing no ratifying vote at the annual meeting. We feel that opens up a risk for groups with an agenda to adversely influence the process and negate the work that the caucus committee has done to put forward the best candidates to serve the representatives of Lake Forest.
Got it, sorry.
Sure.
Paul Harlow. Glencoe, yes. Okay, checks and balances are part of our democracy. Votes by citizens are a check on the caucus. Why depart from this democratic tradition?
Well, I think it boils down to the fact that caucus system in Glencoe has proven its value over time. If the process was producing candidates who are not representative of the community and how they have looked at and decided issues, then we'd be facing challenges to the caucus system, and it probably would not have been able to survive as long as it does. You also have the write-ins. You have opportunities for people to challenge the caucus system and be elected outside of the caucus endorsement.
Thank you. Susan Curry.
I'll just repeat what I said earlier, which is there are a couple of places within our process that our slate can be challenged by the community. And of course, important to note, there is also actual election day, right? There is an election that is not run by the caucus, that all of our community participates in, and that is where the final results are seen.
Thank you. Paul Blahanka.
Again, since Vote Lake Bluff is not a caucus, it's, I'm not sure it's an applicable question, but I will say regarding the vote at our town hall meeting, one of the things I want to do for our next election cycle within our committee is to have a serious discussion on our process of voting. And whether or not we're going to require, in addition to the signed affidavit, have those people actually sit there and listen to the candidates and attend the Q&A, and then we hand them a ballot versus people who are totally legitimate and are concerned about these various boards and they want to vote, but mom's out of town and dad's at home with 3 young kids under the age of 5, and he doesn't have an hour and a half or 2 hours to sit in Lake Bluff Elementary School. But we do want to get a little bit more definition and process around that voting function so that everyone has a chance to be heard and vote, but still make sure that they're voting based on the comments from the candidates.
Thanks. Paul Harlow, this is the last question. What is the most important role your caucus holds in your community? Although you all have answered this for the last 2 hours, but okay.
I guess just to say that it represents a system that the community has shown is trustworthy. It's something that they can feel confident in that that the caucus will produce people to serve on the boards within Glencoe that are representative of what the true needs and of the people of the community, and importantly, how they would want issues to be looked at.
Thank you, Susan Curry.
I think volunteerism is so important across every aspect of a community, right? So it's not just this political element, and we have so many households in our community that invest in preschool, invest in their churches, invest in all of the other aspects that really make us a village. This similarly is an opportunity to volunteer and take on ownership of a greater part of the role in what the election system and keeping our village running entails. We, I think, have worked to effectively ensure that our process aligns with what we're hearing from the electorate. And while there are on occasion, members of the community that have different views than what the caucuses put forward, we've allowed a process for that, while also providing a safety net to make sure there are people who are making sure the necessary work gets done on behalf of the community.
Thank you. Vote Lake Bluff. I know you're not a caucus.
Well, I believe Vote Lake Bluff's most important function is to be a portal of awareness, to make the boards aware of what candidates are expressing an interest in running and how they would solve that particular board's problems, to make the candidates aware of what the board issues are, and most importantly, to make the citizens of Lake Bluff aware of these candidates, what they speak to, what are their priorities, and how they will improve life in Lake Bluff.
And Chris Bennett's Lake Forest.
Sure, I think the most important process or aspect of Lake Forest is the actual process itself for the caucus. That we have over 100 volunteer positions to ensure are filled on a consistent basis across our boards and commissions. We have elected positions on school boards, the mayor and city council. The most important aspect of this is ensuring that the process remains. It's been here for 89 years, and the focus has always been to find the best qualified people within the community that can serve Lake Forest. For the people on the caucus committee to be able to do the work over many months, to put in the time to do it and do it right, and ensure those in the community can trust that those elected representatives are doing it in the best interest of the committee, and for that process not to be compromised.
Thank you all. And I'm going to turn it over to Carol.
Yes, we can all see your passion, your depth of commitment to community service. So thank you very much for being here and speaking to us tonight. And I hope we all found tonight's conversation useful, food for thought if you live in these communities, maybe food for thought if you don't live in these communities. When we started this evening together, I mentioned that we had reasons why we chose to host this event. And another reason that I left unsaid earlier is that the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area actually has a formal position on nominating systems, or caucuses, excuse me, Paul. Excuse me, Lake Bluff. We're using it as a generic term in your case, so thank you for participating. It was written after careful study and adopted by our membership a half a century ago, and these are the principles that we believe should be modeled. Nominating systems must strive for an openness that fosters trust. There should be ongoing communication with the affected voters. Candidates should be evaluated solely on their qualifications for office. That campaigns should be issue-based, to be conducted with civility and honesty. And finally, the work of a nominating system shouldn't strive to preclude independent candidates. So, as we ponder what we've heard tonight, I hope we'll consider these principles because they are intended to put voters first, and I think we all can agree on that. That's why you all are seated at this table, but you have different ways of expressing that principle. So I truly do want to thank you for walking to this very dense subject, and it's a very misunderstood subject. We practice caucusing in a slightly different way here in Northeast Illinois, so thank you for illuminating it. I want to thank you again, Paul Blahanka, Chris Bennis, Paul Harlow, and Susan Curry. Thank you for being here tonight, and Jan. And good night.